You see him on Bally Sports. You're going to see him a lot more this fall on the Big Ten Network. We're joined by Joshua Perry, former Ohio State linebacker. Of course, now he's talking about football, talking about a lot of other sports as well. Joshua, let's talk a little about this Ohio State Buckeye team. You went through a lot as an Ohio State player. You never lost to Michigan. That's what these guys are dealing with.
Yeah, and it's tough. There's a standard that's been set at Ohio State, and the standard is that you want to go out there and win every game, and that includes beating Michigan. So for them, I know that there is a renewed sense of urgency on their behalf in that part of the rivalry, which I think is good. And quite frankly, it's a wake-up call to the program. And I'm not saying that anybody got complacent because I know how they operate over there, but it's always a good thing when you can actually feel it because it creates something a little bit different. And you hear stories of guys who had played before, and one of the things that you always ask is, how many pairs of gold pants do you have? And they'll tell you the cautionary tales about losing to Michigan, but until you feel some of the losses, it's not really real to them. So this team is going to look totally different on the field. Obviously, a lot of the same guys out there, but I think the sense of urgency is certainly going to be cranked up.
And that sense of urgency brought on with a whole new defensive coaching staff practically. Larry Johnson, the only holdover from last year's defensive staff. What have you seen from Jim Knowles, and what have you seen in that install so far?
Yeah, I mean, I've been able to talk to Jim Knowles a couple of times. He's really excited about being able to work with the players at Ohio State. And one of the things that he said to me is that, Oklahoma State had a top 5 defense, and they didn't have any 4 or 5 star players out there. And so when you're working with a high caliber of player, obviously it enhances the scheme. But Jim Knowles brings something very different. He wants to play offense on defense. And what that means is that he wants his defense to be unpredictable and aggressive. And offenses have to react to him instead of him reacting to the offenses. And so I think that's going to be good. You're going to see safeties lined up, 9 yards from the ball. You're going to see kind of a curtain of a secondary, so you can't off the snap already know if it's single high or two high, which I think gives a little bit of a disguise that Ohio State didn't have a year ago. So a lot of changes. I think they're all great changes, and quite frankly, the personnel's fired up about it too. You talk to the players, they're ready to go.
You mentioned complacency. Is there a danger of at least the fans being complacent about this offense because it's so good and it seems like you just throw the footballs out there, they're going to score 50 points a game. You lose 2 draft picks out of the wide receivers. The offense is so talented, but it's not that easy.
I'll tell you one thing about Ohio State fans that I love is there's no complacency within the fan base. Win 11 games, win a Rose Bowl, still issues that are talked about within the fan base. And I think that's a good thing because it holds everybody accountable, players, coaches, administration, top to bottom. When you look at the offense, of course you lose 2 really good wide receivers that were drafted back-to-back in the first round, but you've got Jackson Smith and Jigba back. He was the most productive wide receiver out of all of them in terms of yards. You've got Marvin Harrison Jr., who obviously we know who his father is. Seems like he's got a lot of really good football in his game as well. And then you can look at the run game, and I know a lot of people wish that the run game was more of a feature last year. You've got Travion Henderson coming back. He was really good. And then you've got Mayan Williams. You got Evan Pryor. Really a 3-headed attack in the rush game, but the most important part of it is C.J. Stroud. And he was a guy who maybe started off a little slow for some people last year, really got cooking, ended up being a Heisman finalist. He's back, and he's going to be a year better than he was before. And so that's the thing that's exciting here. I don't fear that there's any complacency. I don't fear that there's going to be a step back offensively. So many good pieces in place, and they just got to go out and execute.
Finally, another kind of role reversal. It's usually Michigan coming off a loss and Michigan preparing for a big game against Notre Dame. Ohio State opening up against Notre Dame. We heard Ryan Day say he's expecting to be an electric atmosphere at the Horseshoe, that primetime game Labor Day weekend. Your thoughts about matching up against Marcus Freeman, a former Buckeye, in his first head coaching job?
I mean, a lot of storylines, a lot of fun stuff for us to talk about as we lead into the game. I mean, you've got 2 of the historic traditional programs in college football. I literally cannot wait to see the aerial shots of the stadium with those helmets and those jerseys out there. It's going to be great. Marcus Freeman, I believe, is a phenomenal head coach. His scheme speaks for itself. We see what he's doing on the recruiting trail. He's really trying to reinvigorate this Notre Dame program. I think Ohio State is still ahead of the curve in terms of where they're at as a program because you've got a really good returning quarterback and you've made some changes on defense, but there's been a little bit more continuity. You got a new head coach versus a guy who's going on into year 4. But this is going to be an exciting one, though. I know there are going to be a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, a lot of tension as that game comes up. But these are the matchups that we also love to see. And I give a lot of credit to the administrations for both of these schools for scheduling such a big game in week 1. This is what college football fans need.
All right, thank you very much, Joshua Perry. You can see him on the Big Ten Network as well as Bally Sports. Preseason is here. The offseason is over. Ohio State, Notre Dame September 3rd. Buckeyes will report to camp a week from today. Their first practice coming up on Thursday, August the 4th. In Indianapolis, Mark Kutz, BCSN.